Hey guys! For our second reading lesson this week, we're going to be looking at specific sections of our story, Mrs. Buell, and we're going to be taking some notes and underlining or highlighting important pieces. And we're going to do that I'm going to do a couple examples for you. I'll do two different sections and kind of talk you through my thinking, and so you kind of understand the process. And then your assignment today, you'll have a picture that you'll go into on Seesaw, and you should be able to highlight and underline things, and either write little notes in the margins by writing them out with your fingers, or I think there is a text feature where you can add a text box and type your thoughts on the side too if the writing isn't quite as easy. So I'm going to read this section one out loud, and then I'm going to talk you guys kind of through my thought process and share that with you, and then do one more example for you with a couple questions, and then you'll get to do the third section on your own. So this is section 1 of Mrs. Buell. For years and years, for what seems like forever, I've gone to Buell's when I had a dime to spare. It's a run-down, not very clean corner store. Kids go there mostly for licorice and bubblegum and jawbreakers and popsicles and comic books and cones. She only has 3 flavors and the cones taste stale. Still, she'll sell you 1 scoop for 15 cents. It's not a full scoop, but it's cheaper than anywhere else. It's the only place I know where a kid can spend 1 penny. Mrs. Buell is run down too, and a grouch. She never smiles or asks you how you are. Little kids are scared to go in there alone. We laugh at them, but really, we understand. We felt it too, when we were smaller and had to face her towering behind the counter. Okay, so that's all of section 1. What's most important in this section, I think, is Kate's description of Buell's and Mrs. Buell. Kate says that Buell's is the rundown neighborhood store, and Mrs. Buell, the owner, is rundown too and grouchy. So in the margin, kind of right over here, I'm going to take a highlighter and highlight that word rundown. And then where does she call her rundown? She calls her rundown and grouchy right there too. So that's just a note from me. And in the margin, I'm going to write, oop, that's not the right color. I wanted it to be black. I'm going to write Mrs. Buell. I'm just going to write Mrs. B for now. Mrs. Buell is the run-down, grouchy. Oops. Oh, it won't let me finish writing the word grouchy. Run-down, grouchy owner of a run-down, not very clean, store. Next, I'll underline the sentences that seem most important to that section. So specifically, it's a rundown, not very clean corner store, and Mrs. Buell is rundown too, and a grouch. So those are the 2 sentences that talk about what I think is most important. I don't think it's really that important that we talk about the 3 flavors of cones, or that it's a place where a kid can spend 1 penny. Those don't seem like as important pieces of information to me. So I'm just going to focus on that main piece from this section. So if I look at the note that I took and what I underlined, it all focuses around her description of the store and Mrs. Buell. Based on what I know about this story, I think that those are 2 really important things to remember. So that is section 1. On section 2, we're going to do the same basic thing, but this time we're also going to look for some details that support the main idea that we're talking about, okay? So let's go ahead and read section 2. She was always the same, except that once. I tripped going in and fell and scraped my knee. It hurt so much that I couldn't move for a second. I was winded too, and I had to gasp for breath. I managed not to cry out, but I couldn't hold back the tears. Mrs. Buell is big, but she moved like lightning. She hauled a battered wooden chair out from behind the curtain that hung across the back. Then, without a word, she picked me up and sat me down on it. We were alone in the store, but I wasn't afraid. Her hands, scooping me up, had been work-roughened, hard but kind. She still didn't speak. Instead, she took a bit of rag out of her sweater pocket, bent down, and wiped the smear of blood off my knee. The rag looked grayish, but her hands were gentle. I think she liked doing it. Then she fetched a Band-Aid and stuck it on. Does it still sting? She asked, speaking at last in a voice I'd never heard her use before. Okay, so now if we're going to look at this section and try to find the most important pieces of information, I'm thinking that we might focus on the fact that Kate hurt her knee and Mrs. Buell helped her. So I'm going to write just in the section, in the margin, sorry. Kate hurt her knee and Mrs. Buell helped her. I might add that this was odd behavior for Mrs. Buell. Okay. So now I'm going to look for sentences that give me that important information. I think we can start with the sentence, I tripped going in and fell and scraped my knee. I think that kind of describes how Kate hurt her knee. We could include the next sentence if we wanted to, but we don't have to. And then we want to talk about how Mrs. Buell helped her. So let's look. She, without a word, she picked me up and sat me down on it. I don't necessarily care that it was her bringing the wooden chair out, but bring her out and sat her down. Instead, she took out a bit of rag out of her sweater pocket, bent down, and wiped the smear of blood off my knee. I think she liked doing it. And then I think it's important for us to notice, too, does it still sting, she asked, speaking at last in a voice I'd never heard her use before. So those are all kind of sentences that support my thought that this is kind of the main focus of this section. Kate hurt her knee, and Mrs. Buell helped her, and this was odd behavior from Mrs. Buell. We kind of get that when we see the sentence, I tripped going in and fell, and then Mrs. B helping her without a word picked me up. Instead, she took a bit of rag out of her sweater, and then the odd behavior comes from, I think she liked doing it, and then her speaking in a voice I'd never heard her use before. A couple smaller details that help us pull that out. Oops, let's get back down here. A couple smaller details that help with that would be things like I had to gasp for breath, managed not to cry out, and that talks about Kate hurting her knee. We were alone in the store, but I wasn't afraid. That seems kind of like odd behavior for a child being around Mrs. Buell alone. The rag looked grayish, but her hands were gentle. Again, talks about kind of her odd behavior. So even within this section, I'm finding lots of sentences and things that help support the main idea that I've identified. So that's kind of basically what you'll be doing for your assignment today is on the side of the section of section 3, what you're going to do is read the section to yourself and see if you can come up with the main idea, the most important thing about that section, and you'll write that off to the side. And then what I'd like you to do is in one color, probably like a black or a blue, go in and underline the main ideas that help support that. After you find a couple sentences that support that main idea that you've come up with, use another color, red or purple, to underline some of the details that help support your main ideas. I apologize for the bell in the background. My cat just came in and started playing with one of her toys. So you can do that either on the picture that I've attached to the assignment, or I believe you should have a page in your student book that you can use as well, though I'm not seeing a page number for it. Let me see. Let's see. I think if you look at page 76, you might find this section 3, and you can do it on paper and then take a picture of that and submit it, or you can do it on the iPad with the Seesaw app. So that is your reading assignment today, along with your 30-minute